I let my ex stay with me during a crisis, and it backfired horribly. I, 37M, never imagined I'd find myself in this situation. 3 years after our messy breakup, my ex showed up on my doorstep crying about being evicted. 2 weeks later, she was claiming my house belonged to her. But calm as a bitch, and so was the look on her face when she realized who she was messing with. For context, I'm a construction project manager. I bought my house 6 years ago, a fixer-upper that needed serious work, but the location was perfect, and the price was right. I spent almost 2 years renovating it myself on weekends and after work. New roof, updated plumbing, refinished hardwood floors, completely remodeled kitchen. Blood, sweat, and a whole lot of cursing went into making it the comfortable home it is today. I met Melissa 4 years ago through mutual friends. She was gorgeous, fun, and seemed genuinely interested in me. We hit it off immediately and started dating. 6 months in, she moved into my place. Things were good for a while. We hosted backyard barbecues, went on weekend trips, all that couple shit. She lived with me for about a year and a half total. Around the 8-month mark, things started changing. She quit her job as a dental receptionist, claiming her boss was toxic, and she needed a break. No problem, I supported her decision. But weeks turned into months, and she made zero effort to find another job. Instead, she spent her days scrolling through social media, watching reality TV, and complaining about how bored she was. When I'd gently ask about her job search, she'd get defensive. "Why are you so obsessed with me working? Do you think I'm just using you for money or something?" Meanwhile, she was constantly buying expensive clothes and makeup, racking up my credit card bills. When I brought it up, she accused me of being financially controlling. Classic deflection. The final straw came when I discovered she'd been cheating with her personal trainer. I found messages on her phone while she was in the shower, explicit conversations about their sessions when I was at work. When confronted, she didn't even deny it, just shrugged and said, "You've been so distant lately. What did you expect?" I kicked her out that same day. She moved in with the trainer, and I spent the next few months rebuilding my life and my bank account. Changed the locks, cut contact, the whole post-breakup drill. 3 years passed without a word from her. I dated occasionally, but focused mainly on my career and home improvements. Then, 2 months ago, my doorbell rang around 9 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday. I opened the door to find Melissa standing there, mascara running down her face, looking like a drowned rat. "What the hell are you doing here?" I asked, not bothering to hide my surprise or annoyance. "I've been evicted," she sobbed. "Connor and I broke up months ago. I've been staying with friends, but I've run out of options. I just need a place for a few days until my new apartment is ready. Please, I have nowhere else to go." Every instinct told me to shut the door, but it was pouring rain, and despite everything, I'm not completely heartless. Plus, my neighbor was watching from their window, and I didn't want to look like the arsehole turning away a crying woman in the storm. 3 days, I said firmly. You can sleep on the couch. Then you're gone. She thanked me profusely, hugged me, which I did not reciprocate, and brought in a single suitcase. I showed her to the couch, gave her some blankets, and went to bed, mentally kicking myself for being so damn soft. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon. Melissa was in the kitchen wearing one of my t-shirts, cooking breakfast like it was 2019 again. "Morning!" she chirped. "I made your favorite bacon, eggs over easy, and sourdough toast." I mumbled thanks and ate quickly, uncomfortable with this bizarre domestic scene. Before leaving for work, I reminded her this was temporary. "Of course," she smiled sweetly. "I really appreciate this. My new place will be ready soon, I promise." When I got home that evening, the house was spotless. She'd cleaned everything, done my laundry, and was cooking dinner. For a split second, I remembered why I'd fallen for her in the first place. But then I remembered finding those messages, and the feeling faded fast. Days passed, and Melissa made herself comfortable, too comfortable. She unpacked her suitcase, arranged her toiletries in the bathroom, and started using we and our when talking about the house. Red flags were popping up, but I ignored them because, honestly, coming home to a clean house and cooked meals wasn't terrible after working 10-hour days. A week in, I asked about her apartment situation. "Oh, there's been a slight delay," she said vaguely. The previous tenant is having trouble finding a new place. Maybe another week. I should have pushed harder, but I was busy with a challenging project at work and didn't have the energy for confrontation. Big mistake. The following Sunday, I was working in the backyard when my neighbor, Frank, came over. Hey man, your wife was telling me about your renovation plans for the master bathroom. Sounds ambitious! Exclamation point. I nearly choked. My what now? Your wife. The blonde. She said you guys got back together and are redoing the house. My blood boiled as I explained she was definitely not my wife and just staying temporarily. Frank looked shocked and embarrassed. Whoa, sorry dude. I had no idea. She seemed so at home here. Even showed me some paint samples and asked my opinion. That's really weird. Frank quickly changed the subject, but the damage was done. My irritation was evolving into serious concern about what Melissa was up to. That night, I confronted Melissa. Why the fuck are you telling people you're my wife? And what renovation plans? She flipped the script immediately. Why are you yelling at me? I just mentioned I had some ideas for the bathroom, and Frank assumed we were together. It's not my fault. You need to find somewhere else to stay. Now, this isn't working. Her demeanor changed instantly. I've actually been thinking, this house has so much potential, but you're not utilizing the space properly. If I move back in permanently, I could really make it shine. Remember how good we were together. Are you serious right now? You cheated on me, remember? This is my house. You need to leave. She smiled in a way that made my skin crawl. Actually, I've been doing some research. Since I lived here for over a year when we were together, in some states that gives me common law rights. Plus, I contributed to this household. I laughed in her face. Contributed? You sat on your ass for months while I paid for everything. And we were never married, common law or otherwise. You're delusional. We'll see about that, she said coldly. I've already spoken to a lawyer. He says I have a case for partial ownership based on verbal agreements and my contributions to increasing the property value. This was absolute bullshit, but the fact that she'd consulted a lawyer worried me. Not because she had any legitimate claim. She didn't, but because even frivolous legal battles can be expensive and draining. The next day, I came home to find Melissa had invited people over, her sister and 2 friends I didn't recognize. They were drinking my expensive whiskey and acting like they owned the place. What the hell is this? I demanded. Just a small housewarming. Melissa smiled, drunk and smug. Since I'm moving back in permanently. Her sister chimed in. You should be grateful. She's giving you another chance after how you treated her. I was speechless. The audacity was mind-blowing. This woman had cheated on me, and now she and her entourage were acting like I was the villain. Everyone who doesn't pay rent here needs to leave. Now. I opened the front door pointedly. They left reluctantly, giving me dirty looks. Melissa stayed behind, arms crossed. You're being ridiculous, she said. This is my home too. You have until tomorrow morning to get your shit and get out, or I'm calling the cops. She laughed. Go ahead. I'll tell them this is my residence, show them my old mail that's still addressed here, and explain how you're trying to illegally evict me. It'll be your word against mine. I realized then that she planned this from the start. The tears, the temporary stay story, the cooking and cleaning, all manipulation to worm her way back into my house, and now she was threatening legal action to steal what I'd worked for. That night, I barely slept. I was furious but also worried. What if she did have some obscure legal claim? What if she refused to leave? I didn't want a protracted legal battle with someone this manipulative. My anger had been building gradually since she first mentioned staying longer, but now seeing her true intentions, any remaining sympathy vanished. I'd given her a chance out of basic human decency, and she was exploiting it completely. The next morning, Melissa was still asleep when I left for work. I called my buddy Dave, who's a real estate attorney, and explained the situation. She's full of shit, Dave said immediately. In our state, there's no common law marriage. And even if there was, you'd need to present yourselves as married for years, not just live together. As for property rights, unless her name is on the deed or mortgage, or you had a written agreement about equity sharing, she has zero claim. What about the illegal eviction thing? I asked. That's more complicated, Dave admitted. She did establish legal tenancy when you lived together years ago, but that ended when she moved out. For this current stay, since you allowed her in as a guest, and she hasn't been there for very long, hasn't paid rent, and doesn't have any utilities in her name, we can argue she's an unwanted guest rather than a tenant. So what's my fastest option here? You typically need to give proper notice for eviction, usually 30 days. But given the circumstances, we could file for an emergency removal on the grounds of misrepresentation and potentially harassment. It might take a few days to get the paperwork through, though. Dave offered to start the process immediately and suggested I document everything in the meantime. One more thing, Dave added. If she has a key, you'll need to change the locks after she's gone. And I'd recommend installing security cameras, just in case she tries to come back. I agreed and thanked him profusely. Then I called my sister Laura, who lives nearby, and asked if she could meet me at my house later to be a witness when I confronted Melissa again. I didn't trust her not to make false accusations. 3 days later, Dave called to say the emergency removal order had been approved. The sheriff would serve Melissa with papers that afternoon, giving her 24 hours to vacate. I made sure to be home when the sheriff arrived. Melissa's face, when she saw the official standing at the door, was priceless. Shock, confusion, then anger. "There's a sheriff here with eviction papers." "What the hell is going on?" she demanded, turning to me. "Not eviction papers," I corrected calmly. "Removal papers for an unwanted guest. You have 24 hours to get your stuff and leave." "You can't do this! I'll sue you! My attorney disagrees. "And everything is being documented, so think carefully about your next move." The sheriff explained the situation to her formally. She had until 2 p.m. tomorrow to remove her belongings or face trespassing charges. She was fuming, but seemed to understand this wasn't a bluff. Laura arrived shortly after the sheriff left, and Melissa's demeanor shifted dramatically. "I can't believe you're doing this to me," she sobbed, suddenly playing the victim again. "After everything we've been through, I have nowhere to go." Laura, bless her, wasn't buying it. "Should have thought about that before you tried to steal my brother's house," she said, flatly. "What?" That night was tense. Melissa alternated between crying, pleading, and threatening legal action. I stayed firm, with Laura staying over as a witness to everything. The next day, Melissa started packing, making as much noise as possible and slamming doors. By 1:30 p.m., most of her things were in suitcases, but she was clearly stalling. "I'm still looking for some of my stuff," she claimed, eyeing my electronics. "You came with one suitcase," I reminded her. "Anything else isn't yours." At 2 p.m. exactly, the sheriff returned as promised. Melissa tried to argue she needed more time, but he was unmoved. "Ma'am, you need to leave the premises now with whatever you've packed. If you believe there are still belongings inside, you can arrange to collect them later with the homeowner's permission and supervision." Finally, realizing she had no more cards to play, Melissa left, but not before turning on all the faucets and clogging the sinks with paper towels. Laura helped me clean up the water damage while I called a locksmith. By evening, I had new locks installed and was researching security systems online. I arrived home first the next day, and Laura came over shortly after to help me clean up further damage we discovered. Food dumped in dresser drawers, "fuck you" written in lipstick on the bathroom mirror, and what smelled like fish sauce poured into my closet, ruining many of my clothes. Over the next 2 weeks, I installed a comprehensive security system: doorbell camera, exterior cameras covering all entry points, and motion-activated lights. I was taking no chances. Melissa's harassment continued. First came the threatening texts. "You'll regret this. I'm not done with you. Hope you enjoy the surprise I left in your bedroom." Then she escalated to showing up at my workplace, causing a scene until security escorted her out. She even sent her brother to talk some sense into me, which ended with him threatening me until my neighbor Frank came outside and told him to leave before he called the cops. I documented everything and filed for a restraining order, which took about 3 weeks to process. The judge granted a temporary order based on the evidence of harassment, with a hearing scheduled for a permanent order. About a month after the eviction, around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of breaking glass. Someone was trying to break in through my back door. I grabbed the baseball bat I keep under my bed and called 911, then crept downstairs. Through the kitchen window, I could see Melissa and a man I didn't recognize trying to force the door open. I flipped on the exterior lights, and they froze like deer in headlights. "Police are on their way!" I shouted through the door. "I have cameras recording everything." They ran, but not fast enough. The cops caught them 2 blocks away. Thanks to my security system, the evidence was clear, high-definition video of them breaking my window and attempting to enter. Both were arrested for attempted breaking and entering. The legal process moved slowly after that. Melissa was released on bail pending her hearing, but violating the temporary restraining order added another charge. The permanent restraining order was granted at our hearing 2 weeks later, ensuring she couldn't come within 500 feet of me, my home or my workplace. It took almost 2 months for her case to resolve. She eventually pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for probation and paying restitution for the property damage. A week after her guilty plea, I drove by her sister's house, where Melissa had apparently been staying throughout the legal proceedings. She was sitting on the front lawn, surrounded by boxes and bags, all her possessions. She was crying hysterically into her phone. Through my open window, I could hear her begging someone for a place to stay, using the exact same lines she'd used on me. Her sister had kicked her out after the court case, embarrassed by the scandal and unwilling to house someone on probation. None of her friends would take her in either, now that her true colors were revealed. The karma was almost poetic. I didn't stop or gloat. I just drove by slowly, making eye contact briefly. Her face when she saw me was priceless. Shock, then rage, then defeat. It's been 4 months since then. My house is peaceful again. Sometimes I still find myself checking the locks twice or waking up at the slightest noise, but those moments are becoming less frequent. I've learned a valuable lesson about misplaced compassion and the importance of boundaries. The old saying is true, no good deed goes unpunished. But I've added my own corollary, no bullshit goes unchallenged, at least not in my house.